Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam, ala rasulillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you, sis?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, I'm fine. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. For anyone who doesn't know, this month I launched a website called reverts.net. It's a place that aims to help support reverts and Muslims alike worldwide, inshallah. We have Quran there, revert stories, articles that give us how-tos, tips, recommendations, and hopefully, inshallah, are a source of knowledge, or at the very least, the direction of knowledge, inshallah. So as a result, me and Sister Summer from the Niqabi Diaries have decided to do a revert series where we approach topics related to the revert journey, and just how to deal and manage and sort of reach the end goal. I don't know, say as safe as possible, as natural
Yeah, I
as
suppose
possible.
it's not really an end goal, is it? You're just kind of working your way journey, like little bit by bit, isn't it?
Through life, yeah. The end goal is Jannah, of course. But
Yeah.
So the topic today is what is expected of new Muslims. So for me, this is a pretty broad topic, and it can be broached in so many ways. So I think we're probably only going to scrape the surface in these topics, but hopefully do enough justice so that anybody watching, revert or not, can take from it, inshallah. I think the first thing you need to sort of have in check is the expectations you should have for yourself. And I think this is something that we should have in general in life anyway, like whatever your role is, whether it's mum, wife, husband, whatever, you should always have a certain level of standards for yourself. So I thought maybe it'd be beneficial to get into that a wee bit, because I think our stories are very similar in the sense of when we reverted, we went straight in, like really hard, that we were thirsty and hungry for knowledge. But I mean, what expectations do you think a new Muslim should have for themselves?
They need to be realistic and sincere. Make sure that you kind of take things in your stride. When you learn something, start putting it into practice instead of just like learning lots of things and then not really putting the things into practice. When I think back to those early days, it took me a while to learn the Salah, how to do it. And I had a friend that had become a Muslim, just a week before me. And she was the one to kind of keep nudging me along. She's got quite a strict personality, I think. I think at least that time I felt like compared to me, she was a lot more, she's African in it. Like she's Ghanaian as well in it. So she was proper just like, yeah, we need to be doing these things. Like it was like a checklist of stuff in it. So
yeah,
mashallah, she was proper just going in with the stuff, right? So it's like me, like I was kind of like casual, and I had a lot of Muslim friends who weren't practicing as well. So I was hanging around with them a lot still. So they kind of made me feel like, oh, well, I'm a Muslim now, but it's just like, yeah, we're just chilling. Alhamdulillah, I'm really glad to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for her, because like she really kept me in check and let me, like always reminded me that staying as I was at that time was not acceptable. I needed to move on from that stage, and having those kind of friends, I'm not saying they were bad people, but they were not practicing and they was doing a lot of things which weren't correct. So for me to stay like that was not going to help me.
No,
as a Muslim, even with my family structure as well. For me to say to my family, I'm Muslim, and then they see me just carrying on my life like the way I had been doing, it wouldn't have been any kind of dawah to them or convince them that, oh, you've done something to improve your life. Even when you do start making the changes, they still don't understand like why you're doing certain things specifically, or if you're really serious, to give yourself time as well. It took me a while to put hijab on and all these other kind of things. Like I was like, kind of in dribs and drabs. And
I was actually telling a group of sisters, I've sort of created a sort of Muslim sister group in Glasgow, and the other week I got asked about putting on hijab. In my first sort of experience of that. And honestly, like my experience is a mess. First of all, buying things online wasn't really a thing then. I was young, so I was broke. There was a girl who was a friend of mine who, me and her went on this journey together. We said our shahada on the same day. So we started off our journey together. So this woman, Somali woman, sister, mashallah, she really helped us a lot actually. She gave us these 2 hijabs, but they weren't great. I loved mine, even though it wasn't perfect. It was my first hijab, so it meant a lot. And it was like random colours. It was like sort of at one end, it was like proper like grass green. Then in the middle, it was like burnt orange. And then on the other end, it was like bright red. But it was sort of infused with this black henna type sort of style. And my friend, alhamdulillah, hers was worse than mine. Hers was like a square silk hijab with kittens on it. And we actually went with kittens' faces on it, like little kittens. I don't know if you can picture like old Russian grandmothers when they have their little silk under their chin. So that's like a Scottish thing. We have that as well, yeah. Like my gran used to have these. So that's the way she wrapped it. So she had it like this little sort of Russian granny style with kittens all over it. We went to the mosque like this and said our shahada, you know, but we were so proud of ourselves that we actually had something to cover our head. So obviously that's not ideal, but this is an example of the imperfections that comes with a revert journey. And I just want to pick up on a word that you mentioned, and that's realistic. Being realistic really does center you and keep that balance. Like any advice in terms of pace of learning, I always say balance. Not too much, not too little. If you do too much, you end up being overwhelmed or burnt out. If you do too little, then you don't make the progress. Eventually, you fall back into, you know, bad habits or bad lifestyles or bad company. So you really do need to be moving forward at a decent pace. What is it you're trying to achieve? What type of Muslim do you see yourself being? This is the ultimate self-care, you know, like it really is. Like you have all these people online that are talking about, you know, skin routines and fitness routines and blah, blah, blah. Like this is the ultimate self-care. This comes first before all of these things. If you really want to look out for yourself and feel good about yourself, and all it starts with, you know, your heart in terms of learning rulings and things like this, all of that's going to take time. So therefore, you need to prioritise time for it.
You definitely have to take those steps closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for me, well, one or two vital pieces of advice that I would give. A brother had, mashallah, who was giving me dawah at the time, may Allah bless him, but he said to me, don't hang around with Muslims who don't practice. It was an advice I didn't take, okay? Like initially I didn't take that advice until I managed to move from my city. I was so involved with them. It was, you know, it's hard to drop like your friends and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? Especially when they find that you've become Muslim, everybody's excited, even non-practicing Muslims. It was something I didn't do initially. I wish I had, but it just didn't work out like that. So alhamdulillah, if that's an option that's open to you, so moving to another city, another country, whatever, it may be changing your environment somehow. That will inshallah help you. If you can't move at all, you can bring new people into your life, sticking to those people who do follow the authentic Islamic practices. Second piece of advice, any book that somebody gives you, that book should have like references, the Quran from the authentic Sunnah. You know, I didn't know what the Sunnah was at the time, obviously, but because there's some books that people give you, like maybe the title is like, 100 Sunnah to do every day. And there'll be some strange things you'll find in there. For example, there's one where people say like, don't leave your prayer mat out because the shaitan will pray on it or something like that. There's different things like that. And there's books with these, there's these books with this like weird kind of things. You read it and you'll think like, what is this? And obviously it's all new for you. So you don't want to criticize it because you're thinking, well, you do believe in Islam. So you're just trying to learn as a, new Muslim. But if those kind of books that you're reading don't have any references to the Quran directly or the Sunnah that's telling you, it's from this hadith or it's from this particular ayah in the Quran, don't even bother to read that book. Like drop it. I did have a good few books that were like that actually in the beginning, from people who were mashallah really nice, friendly Muslims, and they were trying to advise me and stuff. But they was coming from like, just weird cultural things.
The thing is that, just like anybody can have a YouTube channel or have a platform online, anybody can also write a book, so you really do need to know the authors you're reading from. And again, this is something that takes time, but inshallah, you will get there. I think that's one thing you really need to sort of have a wee bit of mercy on yourself from. In the beginning, it is about getting to know the basics, and then getting to know where the basics come from, and etc. Is a process. You just take it step by step. Don't get too frustrated at the fact that you're not really understanding, or you have to be so careful. Like I often go really frustrated about how careful, you know, you had to be sometimes. But hopefully, inshallah, if you really invest your time in increasing your knowledge, especially in the right areas, you will become more independent in that sense. You will be able to hear something and recognise that it's not right. But until you get to that stage, you have to have a wee bit of mercy. But I just wanted to pick up on something that you mentioned at the beginning of what you were saying. And it was about that sacrifice that you have to make sometimes, you know, letting go of people and things that are not good for you. The advice I got given at the beginning was just start with the places, you know, start with the environments. Don't put yourself in an environment that's beneath you. You don't even need to sort of make that harsh in the moment decision of stepping away from them. Once I started doing that, those people did start to disappear. It wasn't something that was immediate, and it wasn't something that was harsh and made me feel bad. It was just something that came naturally. This is the honour of being a Muslim. We've been given the respect and we've been given the honour of recognising what our purpose is. And don't step into this thinking that it's going to be smooth. It's not, but it's going to be easier than any life you've had before. It doesn't matter what you're going through. It doesn't matter how difficult the struggles, knowing and understanding Allah. You're good, you know, like you'll be fine. You know, you sort of counsel yourself through life, knowing Tawheed and understanding Allah. The most valuable thing in the world. And that sort of leads me on to my next point in terms of expectations. Like, in terms of a learning journey, what do you think are the initial priorities a new Muslim should have?
Oh, definitely the Salah. Like, this is the main thing. It's like, you know, learning your 5 pillars, like at least, you know, you're going to learn what the 5 pillars of Islam are, but the Salah, this is the main thing, because that's what you have to do every day. So that's like, that's the standards. In the beginning, I couldn't even say wa alaikum salam. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was really struggling with the Arabic. It was really just terrible. When I did learn the Salah, it was from a book. I didn't learn it directly from somebody, but, you know, when I would go to the masjid, which wasn't all the time because I didn't really have a masjid that was so close to me, you get to be kind of in that environment. So if you get the opportunity to go to the mosque and pray, if you've got one that's nearby you, make the most of that, because that will help you get used to doing the movements in order and all that kind of thing. You could probably get your Aisha and your Maghrib in the masjid, and you'll be able to listen to the recitation of the Quran, you know, and follow along with the rest of the Muslims. That's going to be really beneficial for you. So if you get the opportunity to do that, then definitely take it. Alternatively, if you live in remote, get online, you know, watch videos online and stuff like that. You know, we didn't have those in, at least I didn't have that in my time. There was no online videos to watch. I had a book and I was just using it from transliteration. Nearly 21 years.
Wow. SubhanAllah. Next year's 18 year. I can't believe it. Amazing.
Yeah, SubhanAllah.
Yeah, no, definitely share the sentiments. Absolutely. I think outwardly, but in terms of actions, the first thing you should be learning is your Salah. Like, that's a given. And like you said, it's a part of the 5 pillars, so we know this. And it is hard. Like, I really struggled with Salah as well. I remember being put on the spot the first time I did Salah. So, like, someone said, right, okay, stand up. You're going to do it. I'm going to point. I'm going to tell you, and you're just going to do it. And I remember being like, okay, so you need to do this. You need to do that. And you need to do this. And I remember even just putting my head in sujood was one of the most uncomfortable experiences I ever felt in my life, but only because of the disciplinarian that was hovering over me, you know, like there was no compassion. It was like, right, you're late to Salah. You're what, 18? That's unacceptable. Let's go, quick. And the Arabic, oh my gosh, I remember sitting around a table with 2 other Revert sisters who were just as new as me. One of them had reverted with me. Like I said, we said this shahada on the same day. So we're at the same level, yeah? And we're sitting around the table and we're sort of repeating Al-Fatiha, and we're going through Al-Fatiha. And I remember how difficult I found it. And in comparison to the 2 people that were sitting beside me, I was absolutely rubbish. Like, I couldn't memorise it at all. They were memorising really quickly. The pronunciation was off. Like, you know, the Scottish accent. You know the Scottish accent. You know the reputation it has. I absolutely love it and honour it. But because of it, it was so difficult. We were doing it for ages, and I just felt like I had made no progress. And I was so gutted, and I remember getting really upset about it actually, and that same person who was quite disciplined on me, they were like, listen, I'm acting like this is because this is what you should do for yourself, but you're doing amazing. Like, you're really doing amazing. And I swear, if they never had that conversation with me, if they never reassured me that I was on the right track. The only way was forward, and that I would get this, that I would be able to recite Al-Fatiha one day from memory. That's something that the Muslim community can take away from what we're saying is, you know, have that balance in how you help and broach and teach reverts, inshallah. Generally, what do you think is expected of a new Muslim?
I think like when you become a Muslim, what usually happens is that, I don't know, you kind of get bombarded in the beginning. That can be exciting, but then it can be overwhelming as well. And like when I became Muslim, it was like my family, when I told them that I'm Muslim and stuff, they started asking me all these questions about Islam, and I didn't know the answers. So it's like, so from their perspective, it was like, well, how can you become a Muslim and you don't know the answers to these questions? But as Muslims, we know that we just need to understand the basic tenets of the religion. We don't need to know every single, you know, thing inside out, because nobody ever will. You can be a scholar and like learning still consistently all your life. There's always more that you can do to progress and learn and advance. People don't get that. You know, it's like, oh, well, you should know everything. You should know the answer to this and this and this. So you kind of get bombarded from that perspective. And I think from maybe the perspective of like the Muslim community, obviously you are fresh, you are still a baby. And most of them, they will just see that, yeah, you don't know anything. And you don't really. But the problem with that is sometimes that you'll get Muslims who also don't actually know anything, but they think they know more than you do just because they've been Muslim all of their life, even though they're not practicing. Or maybe they're practicing from a cultural perspective, which isn't Islamic, and they don't know the difference. If you've been reading and getting like books from reliable sources and been learning from somebody who's reliable, you can learn some things which are, you know, sound. And then when you start implementing them or practicing them, you'll get criticized from cultural Muslims who don't really know. And they're trying to correct you based on what isn't actually correct. Like you kind of feel like, you know, from both sides, you're kind of yo-yoing between from the side of your family and, you know, people that, you know, your friends and people that you've grown up with. It's like, oh, well, you know, you don't know enough. And then from the other side, the Muslim community, it's like, you don't know anything, like literally nothing.
It can often feel like a really lonely place to be at times. And I think on the lead up to converting or reverting, whatever your preference is in terms of titles, it also, I think, is a really individual journey. You need to walk in with the same truth and sincerity as you did upon deciding to take your shahada. You were saying in regards to your non-Muslim family, I had the same experience as you. If you don't know the answer to this important question, how can you call yourself a Muslim? And you're like, well, everybody has their entry level, you know, the deciding factor that made them decide to embark on this journey. I've met mine.
Exactly.
That might not be yours, but I've met mine. Just because I don't know the answer to this question doesn't mean that there isn't an answer. It just means that I've yet to learn. Holding on to that surety, inshallah, in terms of the Muslim community. Sometimes it's us, sometimes it's them. Sometimes it's our frustration of not knowing something or not understanding a ruling and it being so opposite to what we know and sometimes like. But at the same time, the Muslim community are not perfect.
When you're dealing with the Muslim community, is to keep that humility as well with them. So just don't get in your chest about it. Do you know what I mean? Don't feel like, oh, you know, why is everybody trying to tell me something? You know, it is their duty at the same time. The reminder benefits the believer. So even if you have learned something specifically already, you know, there's nothing wrong with somebody else trying to teach it. And it's like, they don't know that you've already learned that. So you need to have that patience with them as well, because, you know, the reality is eventually you will get to that stage where you will be that person that's trying to help a new Muslim. Do you know what I mean? You know, and you won't know what they've learned. So you have to think about it from that perspective as well. So they're just trying to do their Islamic duty as much as possible, even if it happens to be that they're telling you something which isn't fully correct, or even if they tell you in a way that you don't really like, because that can happen too. Sometimes they can be, maybe some people might be a bit harsher the way they tell you something, you know, and obviously, you know, that's on them, but don't neglect or reject the information that is, you know, true and correct just because this person hasn't told you, you know, in this softly, nicely kind of way. You know, try to be analytical and, you know, process the facts rather than just like getting emotional about, you know, what's being said. You know, think about it seriously, because it's for your own benefit at the end of the day. Do you know what I mean? These things can happen to anybody, because none of us are perfect. And as I said, like anybody who approaches you in a way that you don't like, just make sure that you don't be that person later on, because people complain about these things when it happens to them, but then they later on end up doing the same thing to somebody else. So just let that help you to kind of be a lesson for yourself and raise your level of consciousness when it comes to these kind of things further down the line, inshallah.
Don't fear those moments when you're by yourself, you know, like don't be scared of that. Embrace it. As a human being, going to find yourself in situations where you feel absolutely alone. But those are really times that we should be taking as an opportunity. Read more Quran, connect with the words of Allah, dhikr and du'as, etc. That's really where you learn how to be independent in your practice. And I think it's such a powerful thing. Your practice shouldn't be dependent on the people that you're around. Definitely should have people around who are good influences, but it shouldn't be dependent on them. So don't fear that time you find yourself in by yourself. Use it and take it as an opportunity to work on yourself and be more independent in your practice. But I think another thing that a revert must prioritize is learning about Allah. So that's called Tawheed. That's food for the heart. You know, that focuses on the connection. So the Salah is the actions, but Tawheed and understanding Allah is the connection.
That's your Shahada. That's why you need to really know what the Shahada means. Like we all take the Shahada to become Muslim, but we need to really go into depth because it's so rich, you know, there's so much in it. So that is why definitely it's advisable to learn Tawheed as well. You know, alongside those things, the Salah and, you know, reading and learning about Tawheed and understanding it correctly, just try to make as much dua as possible as well, like to build your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is also a personal thing, is worship. You just start talking to him.
For me, I was always very self-conscious about that. I did a post about it on Instagram the other day. Like in terms of dua, I felt like really shy or really silly doing dua because I was like, I'm Muslim now, how can I ask for anything else, you know?
Exactly.
That's the wrong mentality to have. Allah tells us that he loves this and that we need to show that reliance on him.
Exactly.
You know, and Tawheed is the foundation of that. If you understand Allah, you understand his oneness, his worthiness of worship. And like you said, dua is an act of worship, right? And also, you know, his attributes. That is your foundation for life, you know, and that is your foundation for your reliance. As a non-Muslim, we're just kind of lost. We're going through life on this sort of experimental experience, you know, we're trying this way of life, whatever's popular at the time, the narratives and agendas and ideologies that are popular with Islam. All the answers is there. You know, everything is known by the one who created us, the all-knowing, the all-wise. Alhamdulillah, we leave our worries and our fears and everything with him.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. But yeah, I think we've probably covered as much as we can on this topic. We don't want it to be too much and too overwhelming. These are just tips based on our experience and our knowledge and what we know about the deen. Inshallah, I did just want to point out though that me and Sister Summer are not shaykhas and we don't claim to be. Any mistakes that we've made in this video is from us, our limitations and our need for knowledge. But inshallah, anything good from this video is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So inshallah, this is going to be a series that we do. Please don't forget to check out the website. It's called reverts.net, where Sister Summer and I and another creator has put out some articles, etc., to help benefit the Muslim community, inshallah. And there's revert stories up there. If you're a revert, go put your revert story there. But the goal is to create a series that is for reverts, practical, helpful advice on their journey, inshallah, at the beginning, at the middle, and at the later stages.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.